She was the 19-year-old peasant girl who had turned the tide of the 100 Years' War. Now, she sat chained to a wooden block in an English fortress, guarded by the very soldiers she had defeated. The woman who had crowned a king would be destroyed by men determined to prove she was no messenger of God, but a heretic deserving only fire. When Burgundian forces captured Joan of Arc at Compiègne on May 23, 1430, they held the most valuable prisoner in France. The English knew her power. They paid a staggering 10,000 francs to her captors and moved her to Rouen, the capital of English-occupied France. By December, Joan was imprisoned in a grim fortress. The English hadn't just bought a prisoner. They had bought the means to destroy the legitimacy of the king she had crowned, Charles VII. On January 3, 1431, Joan was officially charged with religious crimes. She would face an ecclesiastical court led by Bishop Pierre Couchon, a man who had long served the English occupation. The charges were damning: wearing men's clothing in violation of biblical law, claiming to receive divine visions, and refusing to submit to the authority of the church. This trial wasn't just about Joan. It was about whether France's recent victories were acts of God or the work of a demon-guided heretic. The formal interrogations began on February 21st. Joan was led into the castle chapel to face Bishop Couchon and 42 clerics. She agreed to swear an oath to answer truthfully, but cleverly refused to reveal anything that might compromise her king. Over the next month, Joan endured nearly a dozen relentless interrogations. The clerics hammered her on 3 points: the nature of her visions, her defiance of church authority, and her insistence on wearing men's clothes. They tried to trap her with theological puzzles. At one point, they asked if she believed she was in a state of grace. It was a classic lose-lose question. Church doctrine stated no one could know for sure if they were in God's grace. If she said yes, she was a heretic. If she said no, she was admitting her visions couldn't be from God. Joan's reply was astonishing. She said, "If I am not, may God put me there. And if I am, may God so keep me." Even her interrogators were stunned into silence. The initial 70 charges against her were eventually whittled down to 12. Joan defended herself with such wit and intelligence that some of the judges began to have doubts. One tribunal member quit, declaring the trial was designed to entrap Joan, not seek truth. Another dared to challenge Couchon's authority to even judge the case, and was immediately thrown in prison. Throughout this ordeal, Joan's imprisonment violated every principle of church law. Canon law required female prisoners accused of heresy to be held in church prisons and guarded by women, usually nuns. But Joan was kept in a secular military fortress under the direct control of the English army. Her guards were common English soldiers who saw her as their mortal enemy. She was chained to a heavy wooden block, even in her cell. Sometimes they put iron shackles on her feet. 3 guards were stationed inside her cell at all hours, with 2 more posted outside. She had no privacy, no rest from the constant watch of men who despised her. Witnesses later testified that the soldiers taunted her mercilessly and she lived in constant fear. When she fell gravely ill, she begged to receive the sacrament, believing she might die. They denied her request. The English commander, the Earl of Warwick, only intervened to keep her alive, because they had paid a fortune for her and needed a public condemnation, not a death from sickness. But the danger went far beyond harassment. Later, testimony revealed that Joan faced repeated physical threats. One witness stated that a high-ranking English lord attempted to assault her in her cell. This is the real reason she clung so fiercely to wearing men's clothing. The tightly bound and laced garments offered a layer of protection a simple dress could not. She argued that it was far more appropriate to dress as a man when surrounded by male guards. The judges dismissed her reasoning, but the danger she faced was terrifyingly real. The trial itself was a sham. Joan was interrogated for weeks before even being formally read the charges. She was denied a legal counsel. The whole process was a breach of canon law, and evidence even suggests that the trial transcripts were falsified to make her statements sound more incriminating. On May 23, 1431, the verdict came down. Theologians from the University of Paris had reviewed her case. They declared her visions were the work of demons, her men's clothing was unnatural and wicked, and her refusal to submit made her a heretic. Recant, they told her, or be handed over to be burned at the stake. The next day, they took her to a cemetery and placed her next to the stake. The sight terrified her. Weakened by months of abuse, abandoned by her king, the 19-year-old girl broke. She agreed to sign a document recanting her claims. Her sentence was commuted to life in prison. She was forced to wear a woman's dress, but this lasted only a few days. When the judges visited her cell, they found her once again in men's clothing. Joan claimed her saints had appeared, scolding her for betraying the truth to save her life. But other witnesses told a different story. They said the guards had stolen her dress, leaving her with nothing else to wear. Whatever the truth, the outcome was now sealed. By wearing men's clothes again, she was declared a relapsed heretic. There would be no second chance. The sentence was death by burning. On the morning of May 30th, 1431, Joan was led to the old marketplace in Rouen. A large crowd had gathered. A tall pillar was erected in the center, and Joan was tied to it. The English military took direct control, skipping the final secular sentencing. As she faced her death, Joan asked to see a cross. An English soldier, moved by her plea, quickly fashioned one from 2 sticks. She kissed it and held it to her chest. A formal crucifix was brought from a nearby church, and she embraced it as the flames were lit. Witnesses heard her crying out repeatedly. Her final word, shouted above the roar of the fire, was Jesus. At 19 years old, the girl who had changed the course of a war died in the marketplace. To ensure no relics could be collected, her body was burned 2 more times, and her ashes were scattered into the Seine River. The English believed they had erased Joan of Arc from history. Instead, they had created a martyr whose story would echo for centuries. 25 years later, at the request of Joan's mother, a new trial was held. After hearing from over 100 witnesses, the court declared the original verdict invalid, corrupted by bias and fraud, and in 1920 the Catholic Church canonized her. The woman burned as a heretic became Saint Joan of Arc, a patron saint of France. The trial that condemned her was never about faith. It was a political assassination, dressed in the robes of religious authority, meant to destroy the symbol that had given France hope and made the English occupation untenable. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as powerful as I did, please like this video and subscribe for more chapters from history. See you next time.